Hi, welcome back to the Shifting Schools podcast. My name is Trisha Friedman, and I am hosting without the joy of having Jeff here today. Jeff's hit the road, and he is delivering training on, you guessed it, AI. And of course, that connects with this episode as we continue our series that explores AI from the higher education perspective. You might be wondering, like me, how we can invite AI into our classrooms and ensure students still have that space they need to develop their own ideas, their own voices. We need to think more about the boundaries we need to keep in order to ensure that we are centering humans at the heart of all learning. And this week's guest, Professor Anna Mills, has great things to say to both of those questions. Professor Mills will take us into the world of AI literacy in education, something that she speaks and writes about all the time. Together with Professor Mills, we'll be exploring how AI is reshaping the way that we write and learn and why finding the right balance is so important. In the show notes, you'll be able to learn more about Professor Anna Mills, who is a community college writing teacher, an open textbook author, and an advocate for critical AI literacy, open educational resources, and social annotation in writing instruction. If you happen to be on LinkedIn or you like following newsletters, the work that Professor Mills is doing is simply outstanding. I'd strongly encourage that you connect with her there. Before we welcome Professor Mills to the show, we do have a quick word from our generous show sponsor.
Shifting Schools is excited to be sponsored by newlight.io. Their platform is designed to simplify MTSS frameworks for personalized student support. Built by leading experts, Newlight focuses on getting educators the answers they need fast. Which students need which levels of support? With simple data collection and insightful analytics powered by AI, Newlight's platform provides actionable solutions to support your students effectively. Try it for free at newlight.io. That's newlight.io. Check the link in the show notes to learn more. Looking for a place to connect with fellow educators, share ideas, and grow together? Well, welcome to Camp Shifting Schools. It's the free, vibrant community where educators like you can learn, network, and collaborate. With the fall of X, formerly Twitter, finding a trusted space is more important than ever. Join Trisha and I for exclusive courses, webinars, and Ask Me Anything sessions designed just for educators like you. Let's build a better future for education together. Visit camp.shiftingschools.com and become part of the camp community today.
And with that, on with the show. Professor Mills, it's been a joy to just look through your incredible archive of resources. You've been such a leading voice in this conversation about generative AI. And in this conversation, I'll point listeners to, if you are new to the work of Professor Anna Mills, this might give you a few of the highlights, but certainly it's a deep catalog that you have. So firstly, I'll link to an interview that you gave where you talk about giving yourself permission to change your mind on AI. And I'd love to start there. Can you talk to us, and again, listeners, because things in the world of AI are changing all the time, it's middle of September. At this point in time, is there an aspect of AI literacy that you're still trying to figure out where you land in terms of your thinking? It still feels gray. You need a little more time to think about it or to talk to others about it.
Definitely. I guess the one that comes to mind is how much it makes sense to integrate AI into assignments, and when are students ready for that? And when do they need a protected experience of wrestling with their own thoughts and ideas and trying other strategies. And I've taken this approach of saying AI for writing feedback, but not to help you in the writing, in the actual drafting. I don't want them using AI to come up with the outline or the ideas or to suggest the wording, because I think that's where the thinking practice happens, especially when they're just starting out. They need a certain volume of that kind of writing practice to develop their thinking skills. And I know a lot of other teachers who are saying, "No, we really can't draw that line. We have to accept that they're going to be using it in the writing process, and we have to allow that, and for brainstorming or for revisions, and that we just make that a transparent dialogue. We ask them to share their chat transcripts and reflect on that process." And I've been resistant to that. And I've also wondered, how practical is that to continue saying we need to create this protected space, and how much protected space, and what is the research going to show about that, the impact on learning? And how does that affect the trust that we're building with them if we're really focused on protecting that space and setting boundaries? Is that a negative? So I think there are all these questions affectively about how it feels to draw those boundaries and where they should be and how they impact student learning for students who are less confident versus maybe a graduate student is ready to use AI to help them with a draft, but a first year community college student really does need that practice developing their voice and their own ideas without AI. But I think it's still an area where I feel uneasy, that it's an unfinished project to figure out where to draw that line.
Yeah, it's like we're in the middle of a conversation that it's happening so quickly. There's so many considerations. And as you said, it's like we don't have the research yet. And at the time that we will have maybe the research for a certain tool, it's on to its next version.
Yeah.
There's just so many moving parts to this. But that, I think what you're describing, that willingness to not necessarily say, here's where I am at definitively, I really see as an advantage, because it also means we're listening, we're still thinking, we're still working that opinion through, which probably means like we're testing, we're being open to folks who are on the other side of the argument to the extent that there is a side. And I'm wondering, that willingness to just sit in the uncertainty, Professor Mills, like, you are correct. If this is wrong, you also were called upon by OpenAI to be an educational specialist in anticipation of GPT-4. And that makes me feel optimistic that you are certainly not like a yay, AI for everything kind of a voice. You are critical, you are reflective. And I'm really glad that they asked somebody like that to come and take a look. Do you feel like that uncertainty has been, or that, again, that comfort in the uncertainty has been useful to you in this time?
Yes, I think it's really a blessing and a relief in a lot of ways, not to feel like I have to have the final answer and continue to support a particular ideological approach. And I think something that comes out of the open educational resources ethos, the sense that I'm going to share this and it's somewhat provisional. Other people can adapt it. We can change it later. I'm not trying to sell it. I'm just putting it out there. And we're all going to work together to continue improving what we're doing. So I think it is a relief. And I also think that there are a lot more cases where even like the folks inside of OpenAI might be saying, we have some concerns and we want to be honest about that and address it. And even folks who are really critical of AI might also want to acknowledge some ways it could be useful and their own uncertainties about how to move forward pragmatically, given its popularity. I do hear those conversations, and giving ourselves permissions to have those conversations that kind of move out of the polarized communities of discourse, expectations for discourse. It is really freeing, and it is really a way to support ourselves and support each other, I think.
And I know you've been prolific. You've shared. I really appreciate you bringing up all the work that you've done with open education. I'm wondering, conversely, are there a few other voices or spaces that you appreciate being in where you're also just digesting and processing what others are thinking? I know there's so many. I can imagine you read quite broadly, but does anything come to mind as a I know when something is published or released from this place, I'm very excited to read it or listen to it or watch it.
Yeah, so many. And I feel like social media gets a bad rap, and there are many concerns about particular platforms. But I do feel like there is so much really genuine and earnest engagement and goodwill around uncertainty, even in the places where maybe it's not really encouraged by the algorithm on X. It's still happening. There's still good exchanges there. And then increasingly on LinkedIn, and in private Facebook groups and on Threads and Blue Sky. And that gives me hope. I think the relationships that get built there, you get to know certain people and their voices in a little bit more of a human way than just by reading their piece in a publication. So it does complement that. Like, I definitely look to places like Mystery AI Hype Theater 3000 from Emily Bender and Alex Hanna. And I also look to people like Ezra Klein and the Hard Fork podcast for the New York Times. And definitely Ethan Mollick has been really influential. But I like that when I'm on these platforms, I'm engaging with people who really disagree with each other. And there are times when it goes wrong and there's incivility, but it's pretty rare. There's also a lot of goodwill in turning around an interaction into a productive exchange.
Blown away actually by the generosity in motion that's happening right now with you lending your expertise to this podcast, of course. But I'm thinking I've been doing this experiment on a different podcast of mine called Unhinged Collaboration, where I've cloned the other co-host, her voice, but also her persona. And I was working with a variety of tools to sync the voice to her custom GPT to have real-time conversations. And it was complicated, right? Like, it was really pushing some of my skills. And that platform has its own Discord group. There was a little thing that I was struggling with. I put a thing in the help channel about, hey, does anybody know, like, I'm having this issue, blah, blah, blah. Immediately, somebody responded and we were having a back and forth. And he was like, actually, I can have a call if you want. Like, we can go through it. And I was like, sorry, do you work for this application, by the way? Like, he just laughing and no, I don't. I've been through it and I know what that struggle is like. And yeah, so I think this is a time that a lot of folks want to come together. And it's really maybe in my career, the first time that I think now more than ever before, there has to be a better bridge between K-12 and higher ed. And I'm wondering, from your perspective, what are some of the things that you're thinking? And I know that you have first year students primarily, I believe. What are some things that you're thinking, hey, grade 12 teachers, maybe just know a little bit more about this or think about this aspect as it pertains to this issue?
Let's see. I do hear a lot of students saying that they've been told that AI is wrong and AI is cheating, and that if they use it, they'll be detected. And they feel like that's the message they're supposed to convey to me, is that they know that. And I know that's also where a lot of teachers in higher ed are, and they might be getting that message in higher ed too. And I think so many teachers are shifting in our messaging. So maybe that's a outdated picture that I'm getting. But I think that, yeah, we definitely need to talk to each other more, because amazing things are happening in K-12 that we could be drawing on in higher ed, where we don't focus on pedagogy quite as much as consistently. One effort that comes to mind is PlayLab, which is a nonprofit effort that's K-12 focused, but now involving higher ed more. And it's been neat to see the custom bots that people are building there for K-12, and say, really, writing feedback for junior or senior level English class is not really different than what I'm doing. So we should be talking to each other more. I think a lot can be done in K-12 as far as basic AI literacy. And most of the things I'm doing in my first year college class, I can talk about with my 13-year-old son. And we can experiment together to look at bias and hallucinations, and to talk about the dynamics of interacting with an AI voice persona and how we project on that, and anthropomorphization, and all of that. Would be fantastic to have students come in with that background from K-12. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting because most of my work, of course, is with K-12 professionals, and that spectrum of experience and schools or districts that are investing in some of the necessary professional development or even just protecting teacher time to experiment is so different. So I think about the equity piece of some students going into college or university with a little bit of the foundational understanding or skills versus those who you described a situation where it's like they're just being policed and they have to be afraid of it. And we know that detectors are faulty. So even that they don't necessarily know that piece of it, that's troublesome to me. But I want to refer listeners to another piece of your work. The link will be in the show notes.
Hi, folks. We'll get back to our conversation in just a moment. I want to talk a bit more about newlight.io, the AI FERPA compliant, that's our federal guidelines around privacy of student data, platform making personalized student support a breeze. You know, student privacy is huge in our schools, and Newlight is big on privacy as well. It was one of the first questions I asked the co-founder, Jose, about. There are a few AI systems out there that meet the requirements to being FERPA compliant, and Newlight does just that. Newlight's IntelliTier platform is more than just a data collection tool. It's an AI-powered assistant that has been trained to truly understand the MTSS framework, student context, and school-specific resources. Developed by a team with both social, emotional, and behavioral needs in mind, and with plans to extend into academic support soon. Studies show effective MTSS and SEL implementations can boost attendance, improve grades, and increase graduation rates. Yet many schools struggle with the complexities of gathering data and turning that data into actionable items within the MTSS process. Newlight's IntelliTier platform makes it easy with simple, fast data collection, asynchronous collaboration across the MTSS team, and actionable insight that educators can implement and document their success with. Plus, Newlight is advised by seasoned educators and administrators, so they understand your everyday classroom challenges. You have to try it out for yourself. So head over to newlight.io to give it a try for free. That's NEULIGHT.io. Thank you to Newlight for taking this on, and a proud sponsor of the Shifting Schools community.
I love that you were outlining practices. Hey, consider this, adopt doing this as it applies to written work in higher education. And you also list practices that we don't recommend, because I often think like we need both, right? We need to know, I say this is like the red flags and the green flags. Can you talk a little bit more about some of the practices that you are saying, hey, I really don't recommend this, and maybe here's why?
I think the number one that's really hard is that we shouldn't abandon writing outside of class as a form of assessment. And I know that's tempting because of the academic integrity concerns. And depending on the discipline, it may seem like we can go to multiple choice or we can do all the writing in class. But I do really think that writing is a practice that we offer for developing thinking, and revision and long form writing are essential to that. And we shouldn't use all of the class time to do that in class. We need to do other things in class too. And it's not really possible to write an 8-page research paper or a 4-page research paper all by hand and revise it multiple times. And so that's the first thing I would say is let's not abandon writing. And I would also say, let's not turn over grading or feedback to AI or assume that it can take care of that. Let's not neglect the human aspect of writing. I definitely don't want to see critical, breathless promotion of AI. And I don't want to see that dynamic of policing, the sense of I'm being questioned and observed at every step. But that's one where it's a gray area and I'm still wrestling with it, because I do think we need some forms of accountability, even if they're imperfect, to make it less appealing to skip some of the learning, because we all feel that temptation at times when it's difficult and there's friction. And yeah, that's one area. That's a gray area. But we shouldn't go to extreme forms of surveillance.
And that's an important message because increasingly, I think that's going to be an easier thing to do. We already see a lot of AI technology being used to survey workforces on devices, like key tracking is possible. Those things are possible. But your point about really thinking about how and when do we use the tools and when don't we use the tools is a really critical piece. And I appreciate what you say about, sure, yeah, you could have students write it all out by hand in class in front of you if you feel like that's what you want to do. But suggesting a few of the reasons why that might not be good practice, I'm also thinking of our neurodivergent learners who, a big classroom is essentially a big open office space, right? That's not necessarily going to lend itself to folks doing their best work. And I don't know, I'm curious for your thoughts on this because I'm coming at this from more of a K-12 perspective where I think it's so important for us to be thinking, but what is the point of school in K-12, right? Like, what's the point of having a community where there's a social aspect to it? So I think if your lesson is 100% independent time, what is the point? I feel like there's a trust piece too that's broken when I don't trust you to think about the policies that I'm setting out. And I don't know, do you feel like that idea of thinking about how college and university is also an opportunity for community building and that social component, do you feel students don't necessarily have a choice to be at K-12? They do have a choice to be in your college classroom. So I don't know if you feel like by the fact that they have opted, they've chosen that, if those things are less significant or professors are thinking less about it.
Still crucial. And I do feel like those are the most powerful strategies, and that AI makes us focus more on intrinsic motivation and relationship and the learning process and reflecting on learning and how it meets the learner's own purpose. So those things that we already would do in a progressive pedagogy actually are even more important, and we can see them as responses to AI and as effective at academic integrity, but not entirely effective. So I would still say those are the first line of defense, the most important. And then maybe we do need some other forms of accountability as well. But ultimately, I'm making the case that, like, why would you want to learn to write? What does it mean to you? And what can you get out of it? And how can we connect through it? And how can you connect with classmates? So definitely.
I think what you're saying makes me think of, especially in the writing context, for us to be sharing more, what have some of the assessments, assignments that students don't feel that compulsion to want any kind of shortcut because, as you've been describing, writing as a process of thinking, they are loving that thinking process. It's interesting in this experiment I'm doing where I mentioned we're creating a digital twin of this person and we're improving on it incrementally, but it's also demanding a lot of writing. And I've been saying to my partner in this experiment, hey, I'm sorry, I've got more homework for you. I need you to write out your philosophy of listening because we want to train this thing to listen the way that you do. And I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be a bummer. No, my partner is, I'm on it. I want to do it right now. Why? It's personal and we're going to test it and we're using it with other people. It has all of those ingredients where it's there's an excitement to it, a relevance. And so I'm thinking how this, as you say, it really pushes us, those of us who are teaching writing, what is the stuff where students are going to really want to dig into this, and they're not necessarily going to be interested in what a technology would step in, nudge its way in and suggest. It is their own voice that they want to hear responding.
And creating situations where they know that their classmates are going to read it and might be interested is also important to that. And let's see, what else? You said something else that sparked. Oh, I know. It was just that the kind of writing you were describing was actually prompting. It was describing to the AI how it should behave. And that is a motivating kind of writing because you get this immediate response to it and you can see whether it works. And there's also a play element of interacting with an AI system, a generative AI system, because of that kind of endless possibilities. So that's an interesting point I hadn't thought about as much as so how much prompting as a genre of writing is motivating in itself.
From my experience, massively. I think I've created maybe 5 different guides of mega prompt guides because I do enjoy writing, but as you say, it's that real-time feedback of seeing what works and what doesn't. So I've created a whole bunch of different templates, and that practice led to an activity of doing like prompt hackathons. And again, I'm not talking about like a one sentence thing. I am talking, it's quite often like a 2-paragraph context-rich piece, which it's writing. Like it very much is writing. And so I do wonder, the technology is going to continue to evolve. So the extent to which we'll need mega prompts, I don't know if we'd be having that same conversation a year from now, Professor Mills, but it has absolutely, I think, made me feel like, hey, my writing skills are totally valuable in this whole new context. And high school students that I've done some work with too, they get super excited about that in terms of what can I make that's useful and that is a new use case. I find they're not so interested in the idea of like, do the dad jokes or do the one-liners. I think that's not what I'm thinking about. I'm looking for something that's like divergent thinking.
They're pushing their own thinking out of curiosity as they interact with it sounds like.
Yeah, and I think it's just, you mentioned Professor Ethan Mollick, and this is where I think being a part of those communities, he had this post about using AI to solve a crossword puzzle. And I was like, my goodness, right. I have been testing a lot of the multimodal pieces, but that had not dawned on me. And so this is when I think we're sharing with each other that it's like, oh, if it could do that, maybe it could do this. I don't know. Let's find out.
Yeah, and that's why I'm conflicted about, do I invite students to use it in all these ways and teach them how to write prompts, or do I help them develop their writing skills in a little protected way before I invite them to bring AI into everything? And maybe it's not an either or, because you can have some assignments where they're doing one and some where they're doing the other.
Yeah, it's, again, it's just, I appreciate that sort of oscillating back and forth between what is possible, what is doable, what's going to work. And then also, I'm guessing too, it's sometimes class or course dependent or even student dependent. Professor Mills, you've got this amazing newsletter. Again, we'll link to it. And you've shared really generously what you're thinking about when it comes to AI-generated feedback. And part of the specific post explores ways to help students think about how to use it. Can you take us through how you have experimented and implemented the tool that's called MyEssayFeedback?
This is a tool that was built by someone in the OER world who was working on open educational resources, who is actually a math teacher. And he was very open to my input as an open educational resources textbook author. And I just saw it as this way to do all the things I wanted in one package. So build this critical AI literacy where you're giving students the experience of looking for where AI is wrong. You're encouraging them to push back against the feedback or ask themselves, is this really what I want to do with my writing? Or did this feedback misunderstand what I meant? So the critical AI literacy, but also support for the writing process and some boundaries around AI. So clarity about what's AI and what's not, and space for students to develop their own voice and their own confidence. So the idea of putting AI in its place in relation to the writing process, and specifically a human-centered writing process, I just wanted to have teachers setting the terms of how that ed tech should work and what does that look like pedagogically. What kind of feedback is useful? We should be writing the prompts, not an ed tech company. And so what I do is I have some readings about critical AI literacy, so they have some context on what AI is. And then I build in reflection on AI feedback into the writing process, but secondary to peer review and required visit to a tutor and supplemental to my feedback. So I'm trying to put it in this secondary place where it's there to support you, but it shouldn't be your first focus and it's not authoritative. You get homework credit for reflecting on it and deciding what do you want to do about that feedback, if anything, and maybe pushing back in a chat session in response to the feedback. So I feel like that is working well and is reassuring to students to have a particular clear role for AI and to be encouraged and given credit for pushing back and establishing their own authority as writers in relation to it.
What a great, I think, experience. I'm thinking as like a middle-aged woman. I just got some feedback on a chapter in a book that I'm working on with a group, and it's a peer review cycle. And one of the reviews that came in was like glowing, and this is great, and minor revisions, if any. And the other was like, this needs to totally be reorganized. It was like, maybe like very little is clear to me here. And it's okay, it's probably somewhere in the middle of these two reviews, but learning how to pick and choose the feedback that really works with what you are trying to do. I know so many adult learners for whom this is still difficult, necessary. And I love your point about making sure that the voice is not authoritative, because I think about the voice or the persona of ChatGPT, if you will. And it's so interesting to think about the user interface and design of that. If it always started with a little bit of a header of reminding folks of what it actually is, what it's actually capable of, almost I'm thinking like the warnings that are on different things. And if its tone was maybe slightly more informal, if folks would be having the same confidence in the information that
Right.
it's providing. I don't think so.
Yeah, and there's that automation bias, and especially for students who aren't confident, who don't feel like they have a place in academic writing, or they might be overly impressed by something that sounds polished, even if it's actually overwritten. It's especially a risk. And I don't know, I think that as teachers, we can experiment with the feedback prompts to try to mitigate that or counteract it. One thing that I have in a lot of the prompts is asking it to phrase things in terms of what readers might experience in reading it and what they might be confused about, what questions they might have, how they might respond emotionally, so that it's reminding them it's really about the human reader and it's not about the authority of the chatbot. And then the software is reminding them that feedback might be wrong. And the instructor can comment on the AI feedback. So sometimes I will write a comment that says, actually, I disagree with this. It's misunderstanding how the assignment is envisioned, or I thought your point was clear here. You don't need to expand on that, so that there's a pushback there.
Again, listeners, I think the full post is definitely worth checking out. I hadn't tried MyEssayFeedback before, and I'm really curious to play around with that.
Educators, are you searching for a new space to connect, collaborate, and grow? Well, Camp Shifting Schools is your new home. With the decline of X, formerly Twitter, we're here to offer a safe, welcoming community where you can join other passionate teachers. Take part in free courses, webinars, and live AMA sessions to evaluate your practice. Ready to join the conversation? Head over to camp.shiftingschools.com and become part of the Camp community today. Learning and connecting awaits.
I think in closing, Professor Mills, you've shared so much, so generously, so openly. I'm wondering if you could talk to listeners just a little bit about you. I'm wondering, you've contributed to the conversation around AI in so many different ways. How do you decide what you're going to write about? What are some of the things that maybe for this academic year you're thinking, this is more research I want to do, or you've described writing as thinking. And so I wonder, how are you envisioning using your writing skill set to just continue pushing the needle further in this necessary dialogue?
I think that the social media discussions keep me constantly writing and constantly excited and overstimulated with a million different projects. But I am working on an open educational resources textbook on AI that's just a really simple AI orientation for students. And I'm really excited about that because it comes out of the grounding of my conversations with students and what might they need to know, not just what is this grand narrative that I could spin, but what does the student need to know now? What do I really think that I can share in a vulnerable way? And how might they use that in this moment, since we don't have all the answers and we're just trying to make our best decisions as we go? That's really exciting to me, is that vulnerability and sharing about the uncertainties that I have around process tracking and how to teach writing and when to use it and when not. And also that vision of we can be skeptical and curious and excited and critical and like we can be all those things. And sometimes they actually complement each other more than we might.
Yeah, like just a big yes to that. And I think this is true in areas of AI's influence, even outside of education. One thing that I've just been like razor focused on, I've got lots of Google alerts, this Collar Doolittle challenge. I don't know if you've heard of this. You've got to check out earthspecies.org. There is this interspecies communication challenge where lots of folks are using AI to decode languages that are not human. And I've been like just captivated by this debate because there are some folks who are very much team, yes, let's figure out exactly what the whales are saying. Let's communicate back with them. And there's others who are saying, what if we get it wrong? What if we screw up like a whale migration kind of pattern? Like it is such an interesting debate. And then at the same time, there are folks that have said, if we're able to decode this and better understand other species, maybe people will care about the environment in a totally new, more profound way. And yeah, the possibilities are amazing and scary at the same time. So maybe that's one of the lessons of this era that is not getting the spotlight that it deserves. Like issues are multifaceted, people are multifaceted, and you're right, we can have a charcuterie board of emotions. It doesn't have to just be hummus. I love that.
Okay, yes, I love that too. And I just hope that we can keep some clarity about what is AI and what is us. And that's my other topic that I'm really passionate about, that can we have that transparency so that we can still have spaces where we know it's human and we're centering the human communication or the human production of art, or at least we're talking about how it's a hybrid. That's the other thing I want to see going forward, is educators talking about that, because we need to know what's our students and what is AI in order to assess learning, the students' learning. And in society, we often need to know what's AI and what's not. And I hope we could be voices for that.
And two is this idea of what is intelligence? If there is such a thing as like a synthetic or an artificial intelligence, what is uniquely human intelligence? And even as sophisticated as some of these tools get, what is still the value of coming together and learning together? I don't know if that sounds too cheesy for what you had in mind, but yeah, just even the people are saying a lot about human-centered fill in the blank. And I think, let's slow down. What exactly do we mean by that? I think at least that conversation, I feel, is happening more often, or so I hope.
Yeah, I love that. It always comes back to this idea of relationship and encounter, and maybe a little bit influenced by Martin Buber, but just the idea of there's something about presence and respect and engagement and relationship, and that's central to the meaning of what we're doing. And AI is very interesting, but we can also look at it and see its limitations almost in a comic way, almost affectionately, maybe. Janelle Shane is just this amazing comic writer about AI. And I really love the way she approaches it, that, it really doesn't get it, huh? It's not what we are. It's something else. And we should see and value ourselves and not get too confused about those boundaries. Oh no.
Well, that's a beautiful note for us to wrap on. And I Janelle Shane's You Look Like a Thing and I Love You book is one of my all-time favorite books on AI. So listeners, I might, with the extravaganza list of links from Dr. Mills, I'm also going to leave that one in there because it's a great book if folks haven't picked that up yet.
Absolutely.
Anna, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hey there, dedicated listener. If you've made it this far, we know you're passionate about shifting the way education works. And Tricia and I appreciate you. If you loved what you heard today, We'd be so grateful if you could take a moment to rate and review Shifting Schools wherever you listen to podcasts. Those ratings help us reach even more educators just like you. And if you know someone who could benefit from these conversations, please share this episode with them. Just one person. Think of the impact we can make together. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletter for even more great content. And if you haven't already, join us at Camp Shifting Schools, where the conversations keep going long after the podcasts end. Thank you for being a part of this journey, and thank you for being part of Shifting Schools.